All right. How's it going, everyone? Alex Cuesta. I'm the owner and host of the Opinions Podcast Network. Started off with the Sports Opinions podcast there. That's the main flagship guy where I do interviews of athletes, fans, anyone that wants to just talk sports. It's a great time. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at A_Quest30. Sports Opinions Podcast on Sports Opinions 30 on either Instagram or Twitter. And just love me some sports, and it's a good time always talking about it. And I appreciate you, Frank, having me on here.
Well, I notice in your background, I see some mini football helmets. I see
Oh
a
yeah,
basketball next to Lord of the Rings. So you're
I'm a
my kind
nerd
of guy
too.
already.
Yeah, I'm a nerd. I do it. Listen, I love my Star Wars. I like my Lord of the Rings. I like my Japanese stuff. I do
Yep.
sports, a little bit of everything.
Sports nerd. That's the phrase I like. So okay. Now you mentioned interviews. Who not that you're ranking them, but what was the most one of the most interesting interviews you've done with whom?
It's tough to rank because I've had anywhere from Olympic gymnast Dominique Dawes on the show recently. She was fantastic. It's the fun thing about my setup, and it's pretty similar to the way you do it, it seems, is I like to let the guests talk about what they want to talk about,
Right.
which makes it always interesting because then it makes it unique. I had Mark Allen, who is the ultimate Ironman, won the Ironman, basically created it to the fame it is now,
Right.
and we ended up talking about surfing at the end of it. So it's like it makes it so interesting. One of my favorite guys to have on, I've had him on multiple times, Brandon Scoopy Robinson. He's an NBA insider, and it's just the insight he brings into the game of basketball is fun, and he likes to give the time to a small time podcast like me all the time, so it's always appreciated. So I've had plenty of great interviews, plenty of unique people, so it's tough to rank just one. I'm pretty sure you'd feel the same way if I just do that back to you.
Well, I don't rank them, but the ones that stand out.
Yeah.
I three of them that just jumped off the page for me. One, Olympic swimmer Wendy Krazelberg, who set, and I'm going to mess it up, four world records in the backstroke in 3 days. And
Ridiculous.
to me, that was the story, right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
where the story was. And you do your research, but you don't really know what your research is bringing up.
Hmm.
So you ask the same thing I asked you. So who you are, what are you about, blah blah blah. And he gives me this. Well, we came from Russia when Russia fell and all the little satellite places, and we ended up in L.A. And I didn't speak English very well, so in order to get to know people, I joined the swim club.
Yeah.
I swam a little bit in Russia, but not a lot. Okay, and he said, and I wasn't very good, but I at least got to be a part of a team. So he gets out of high school and he walks on at a junior college. I'm thinking, where did the Olympics come from this?
Yeah,
He said, and
yeah.
I'm getting lapped by people. I'm like, okay. And he said, then my coach said, well, I think you got a little talent, but you need time in the pool. So he said he was transferring to USC. He said, I know the coach at USC. We'll see if we can get you some pool time, but I doubt that you're going to get to swim with the team. Okay. So he gets some pool time and he starts working, and the coach noticed him. It's like, I think you got a chance to be, pretty good. Like, okay, well, whatever. And he starts swimming with the team and he becomes pretty good. And he said
Obviously.
yeah, obviously, yeah. But he said he still didn't realize that he was going to be that good. He said he didn't really know it until he started setting national times. And next thing you know, boom, 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 he's in Olympic trials and he's doing this. And he said, I'm in the Olympic Games. And when you see him on
Bizarre.
TV, you just think these people are brimming with confidence and they know they belong. And he
Hmm.
said, yeah, he implied, he didn't say, it's like, I, I'm in the Olympics? Wow. And he's kicking butt, so that was one just went, wow, that's insane.
Yeah.
And then I had one where I was speaking with Eric Davis, who was one of the captains on the Houston Cougars Five Slamma Jamma team. And I talked to him. I initially talked to him because he was doing something with youth in Chicago, and he used to be a police officer. So I said, "That's the story." Obviously, the Five Slamma Jamma stuff is a story, but that's the story. So I figure this is going to be okay. You played with Drexler and Olajuwon, and you played in the Southwest Conference, and then I want to segue to that.
Yep.
First, he talked about that for about 25 minutes. With I was going to give him 5 minutes,
Okay.
and then he said, "Well, we became the rapping cops when I was a police officer in Chicago. We weren't very good, but that's a way to connect with the kids.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, sure. And he said he was on his beat one day, and this guy walked up to him in a three-piece suit and Cabrini green, and he said, here's my card. I work for Dick Wolf, and will you be able to come to Los Angeles in a couple of weeks if we want to talk to you about something? Like, sure. Like this happens to me all the time. Whatever. And he called him. The guy called him the next day. Said, "Can you be here tomorrow?"
Wow.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That what they did ended up being the story, the genesis for the TV show New York Undercover.
Oh, wow. That's insane.
And then I went, huh? How did I not know that? And how is that buried in the story? So, and then he went on with all the stuff that he did, which was fantastic after that, And what I found is, just like you said, if you let the people run with the story, you'll always get this moment. Or not always, but usually get this moment. Frank, I've never told anybody this before.
Yeah, that happens all the time and you also get man, I haven't had a conversation like this in a long time, because people that we interview obviously all the time are just so used to getting interviewed. They get the questions, right. They prepare for the questions, they really don't stray. Maybe someone tries to get them with the gotcha. They're always prepared for stuff like that, right. But they're not prepared to just have a host go, what do you want to talk about? And then genuinely get on there. And even if they get off on a tangent, just let them go and enjoy the conversation. I found it such a breath of fresh air for a lot of people. And I'm happy I found somebody else that kind of does it the way I do. Like, we can have this cool conversation about so many people. Cause you mentioned your Olympian you had on. I had Maurice Green on.
Okay.
Olympic champion in the sprinter. Yeah. One of the greatest sprinters of all time. And he kind of said in a similar way, like, I asked him about the competitiveness and when you were at the Olympics, how to feel. He's like, to be honest, it was another meet. I didn't know I was there and I didn't know what I was doing until years later when I look back, and I was like, that was a great experience. But he's like, when you're in the moment, when you're competing at Worlds, you're just competing. You're just trying to do the best you can and beat the people next to you. You're not sitting there thinking, going, oh, this is my third world championship.
Right.
And to me, like, we're looking at it and we make all the stats and we make all the comparisons on the outside. But to the athletes, they're just doing their jobs. And it's just such a different mentality that they have going in than what we're looking at it, thinking what they must be thinking, which they sure as hell are not thinking that.
Well, we put our thoughts into their thoughts, and that's not even close. And then if you think about it, you would do the same thing, because that's what you do. And yeah, I've asked people, well, what was it like being in the Olympic Village? And like, I slept, I ate, I went and ran or jumped or played or whatever.
Dominique
it wasn't like
didn't even get to stay. She didn't even get to stay in the Village. They stayed in a hotel. So when I asked her that, she was like, I wish. She's like, they sound like they have a good time. I sure wouldn't know about it.
And like the opening ceremonies, like, when did you? I've asked the question, when did you know you were an Olympian? It's like, well, it was when they told me I was on the team. It wasn't like I'm in the opening ceremonies, I'm waving the flag, and I'm really thinking I'm like, well, when I qualified, that's when I knew. Now the rest of it is getting there and doing what I have to do. But if your meet is 5 days into the event, you're not savoring the experience of being in the opening ceremony. I mean, like you said, you think about that later. But the idea is, I'm going to go compete. I have to do my same preparation, and we know athletes are creatures of habit. I've got to find my way into a pool or into the weight room or whatever I have to do. And then after it's done, I can let my hair down and enjoy it.
And it's interesting because I feel like a lot of us that do this type of stuff with sports podcasting, we've been athletes before, whether it was we stopped in high school or, competed at the collegiate level. I competed at Marist College track and field, Division I. So, and then we get into this phase where I'm going to steal a term from Boomer and Carton, now Boomer and Geo, the NARP, the non-athletic regular person, which we all end up becoming.
At some point.
Now it's like, I can't remember my mentality from college because it was just such a different thing where when they talk about it, I realize it's like, you know what? It's true. You set goals and your only job is to work towards that goal. And then you hit that goal and you get to the next one. You hit that goal and get to the next one. So getting into the Olympics is just a goal. It's not this big feat. It's not a bucket list thing. It's just another goal in the athlete's progression. And it's just funny when you're out of that mindset for so long. I've been graduated now from college for a while now, and it's like that mindset's gone. And now I'm just a guy that really wants to talk to interesting people about sports.
Right,
And
right,
I don't, you know, that's my calendar. So it's like, it's just such a different level of thinking. But these elite athletes, they still have that killer instinct, it seems. Like when you talk to them, their life is still driven by making these goals. And it's just, they're just different people than
right.
all of us in general.
And what they and they've just changed where the goal is.
Yep.
So it might be business, it might be philanthropy, it might be something else, but they've just changed how they go, what they're going to get into. Yeah. Well, I
Mm-hmm.
was a high school basketball coach, and I remembered my playing days, and I'm watching the kids run line drills, and I'm thinking, shouldn't one of these kids stand up and go, "Coach, this is pointless. Why are we doing this? Don't we run enough in practice to run?" But I remember when I was playing, I'm like, I said run, I ran,
Yep.
and I didn't think anything of it. It wasn't a big deal. I was in shape enough to not have to think about it. But then when I'm older, I'm like, I can make this better because they're just running in from line to line. But as a player, that's what you do. So
Mm-hmm.
you don't think about whether it makes sense or not. You just go
Yeah.
ahead and do it. And that's part of setting goals. So that's pretty cool. Well, speaking of which, this is where I become the segue king. All right,
I like
since
it.
talking about running in circles, where are we? Where do you think we are with, speaking of track, with the Olympics and the Olympic movement and the postponement and the possible, maybe not having things in 2021? Um, how do you think that affects the athletes, the organizers, the whole nine yards? I mean, it's obviously we just shut down 2020 and we say we're going to move to 2021. Is it that simple, or is it a lot more complicated than that?
It's definitely a lot more complicated, and I'll talk about the athletes first. In terms of compartmentalizing, your team sport athletes are definitely in a better position than your individual sport athletes,
Okay,
because your team sport athletes, they prepare, they practice. You know, they have to get up for different competition, make a little bit different game plans, but their practice and preparation kind of doesn't change very much in terms of, even with this movement, they could find other games to go and compete at. With your individual athletes, we talked about the calendar, we talked about the swimming, and we talked about track and field. There are different phases of training for these types of events. There is your preseason, your early phase, your regular, and your championship phase, where you're trying every single season, you're trying to get from a point where you can peak, plateau, and then you go and drop off again where you're training. These Olympians, while they're not looking at the Olympics as this, big gargantuan deal like we do, they're looking at it as the time where they need to be at peak season.
right,
And now with the cancellation from 2020, a lot of the athletes were in their peak fitness of the year. And now they have to figure out, okay, now they just went from tapering phase to trying to be in championship phase. And now they have to sit there and retool everything. And it's different for them because track and field, swimming, they go on 2-year schedules in terms of their peaks,
right.
because it goes from worlds to Olympics, worlds to Olympics. So now you're asking a bunch of athletes that were at their peak phase of their 2-year schedule to now extend that into a third year. And it's going to be impossible to get a lot of athletes to do that. I think this benefits some of your more inexperienced athletes that maybe get an extra year to kind of get some
Okay,
training. But but I think some of your experienced athletes are going to be able to weather it. They're going to still put in good performances. But in terms of coaches, athletes, everything, man, this is just for especially the individual athletes, this is extremely difficult time. Organizers are pulling their hairs out because they are so unsure with the coronavirus and COVID
right.
19 what it is going to do. Yes, vaccines are getting rolled out now, but number one, the efficacy of the vaccine, we're told it's pretty high for most of them. We need to really see how it does the general population. And with the elite athlete, how it affects them. If it's going to, what is in these? Is it against some of the bylaws? Can these vaccines really be taken?
Right.
That's the first phase. Second phase is, what's the long-term effects of some of these vaccines? Because like everything else, the coronavirus is hitting everybody differently. It's hit it, all vaccines, all types of medications. There's a reason why there's 3 or 4 medications for all of our ailments, because
Right.
they all work differently on all of us. So are we going to see one of our main competitors in an event have to now bow out because they have some side effects from the vaccine.
Right.
It's such a interesting time that we live in, and a good and terrible time. And not to say that hardships and difficulties aren't a part of getting to this phase anyway, but it's just such a weird time. And with the organizers, the venue itself lost a ton of money. They built up the Olympic Village. Unlike certain places, America is maybe the only place in the world that is almost ready right away for the
Right.
Olympics, because we have so many major stadiums, from college stadiums to pro stadiums in all different sports. It still costs America a ton of money. And afterwards, the economic downturn still hits the cities like everywhere else, but we're kind of geared up to weather it more, where you're asking a lot of these other places, even if they are first world countries like America, it's still very difficult. So the money being lost, I think, will probably push this to happen in 2021 regardless, even if they have to bring in. I'm pretty sure they told a lot of people that didn't make the Olympic standard or A standard, just be on standby. If you
Right.
were on that list or underneath, be on
You,
standby, because we're going to have this. This is going to happen. We can't hold this back another year.
right.
So, and the people that run worlds are probably chomping at the bit going, Olympics needs to get their act together because we need to start scheduling worlds.
Right.
So it's a really big cluster. I don't envy any of the organizers. And we talk about, a lot of times we rip on the NCAA for how much money they make. And even the, IAAF and track and field Olympic organizers, they all get ripped for how much money they make. They're earning their money right now.
Right.
Whether they deserve it all,
Or
they're
not. Right.
earning it right now because they're not in an envious position. So, are the Olympics going to happen? I'd probably put my money on it happening, whether or not it's safe. Honestly, it's going to be, if you want to come at your own risk. I really feel like that is going to be the situation. I don't know how many patrons are going to be in the stands. It
Right.
depends on how distributed the vaccine is at that point, how effective all the vaccines are at that point, because AstraZeneca is about to roll out the third vaccine. We know there were another few companies that were in phase 3. We might have 4 or 5 vaccines floating around by that time. A lot of things are going to play, but I mean, we'll see. The organizers have been trying to put on a happy face this whole time, trying to be positive in terms of getting it done, but I don't know. We'll see. If you're high profile athletes, say they're going to go, I think it'll happen. If enough of them bow out again,
Right.
we'll find out. Money talks, names talk.
Yeah. Well, you made a couple interesting points of, if it were in America, say it's in LA or New York or wherever, you have enough places where you can house the athletes and you have enough venues where you can make it work. You can put them in USC and UCLA and, wherever else you want to put the athletes in the dorms. You're looking at my thought is, how are you going to house the athletes? If you have to go with social distancing and all that, you might be able to put the event on, but how are you going to get the people there? How are they going to get back and forth? Where are they going to stay? How are they going to eat? There's so many different things that have to be taken into consideration if we're still in that mode. If everything's been eradicated and it's business as usual, that's one thing. But this is January. I don't see that it's going to be that cut and dried by then. So as you said, if I'm an athlete, do I want to go? If I'm an athlete and say this was going to be my last Olympics last year, and I'm gearing up for this year, am I able to do that? Because we know there's a short shelf life of what you can do in your prime and how long your prime can last. And we've seen people that were in their prime 3 months ago and now they're not. I can think of several athletes that were, world-class record holders and they didn't make the Olympic team because they missed their prime by just a few months. It was the wrong time of year. They were 2 years early. They were 6 months early. And suddenly, boop, they went down. So, there's so many different things to look at here. And as you said, are we going to be able to even put them in the same venue? And I comes to mind the scenes I've seen of Sarajevo. And you go, wow. Because as you said, we don't think about building for the Olympics. We may tweak a little bit here and there. Yeah. But, you have to be able to make something where, like the Saddle Dome in Calgary. Okay, we turned that into something. Okay, but the rest of Calgary didn't catch up with that. It took a while for the rest of Calgary to become, this is what we're going to be the rest of the time. We're going to have world championships and other games here. But you see some of these places are just ghost towns after the Olympics, and like, do you want to do that? Can you do that? Should you do that? Which is also, I think, part of the, I don't want to call it problem, but part of the thing we deal with the Olympic movement is the necessity of it. I think it made a lot more sense 40 years ago when we were celebrating amateur athletes than it
Yes.
does now when we're not. And you can slice that however you want.
See, I want to address that a little bit because I think the Olympic choosing process is a problem currently because a lot of countries want the prestige. A lot of countries want the instant economy.
Right.
But when they leave, who's going to help all these people that had jobs
Right.
for 3 months for, to prep up the construction and everything, take it down. But after that, a lot of people are now jobless or they left the job because this job was well paying and
Right.
now they can't go back. So again, there, as much as, places like going to Niger, Qatar, smaller countries that would love the publicity and you can see their beautiful cities that they have there, their culture, their art, it's all fantastic. But I think we have to think about kind of what goes on after and kind of the humanitarian side of it, saying like, unless you can take care of your people after, how are you going to, do this? Because then it becomes a big crisis and it becomes something where the bigger countries like the United States, like Britain, like Canada, even Russia and China in a humanitarian effort to kind of get these people back on their feet. And I think it's kind of unfair to some of the other countries. Like, yeah, we have it, but should it really then fall on the shoulders of these other countries to pick up, these smaller countries after the Olympics leaves them decimated?
Well, and also we're asking you to spend billions of dollars to put on the games, when those billions of dollars could have went to your economy and to your people.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and if it were to be a profitable enterprise, which it may have been at some point, but we sure as heck isn't now,
Hmm.
you're spending money where it could have been better spent someplace else.
It's the same problem with the World Cup. It's the same problem with all these
Right.
major national events that come in. And as much as it's, great to see these other cultures, it might start to be saying, because like you said, the money is more than it's ever been now. It's not millions, it's billions that we're asking places to spend. And for some of these places, it's most of their gross domestic product that they're
Right.
spending on this. And it's just unfair to do. It'll be a tough pill to swallow. There'll be a lot of protests, but I think we need to start limiting it to a pool of countries that enter into a certain phase if their economy can handle it.
And I'm looking at it from a point of view of, okay, who's making money off of this? The
Yeah.
advertisers are paying money to NBC, ESPN, Fox, whomever. Are they trickling down the money to the venue? I really don't think so.
I
So
doubt it
yeah,
highly. Yeah.
ESPN, Disney may be making money off of it, but they're saying, hey, we made $17 billion. Let's give somebody another $3 billion. I don't think they're doing that.
Not
So
at
yeah,
all. Not one bit.
yeah, we have to put on the games. Well, we don't have to put on the games; just broadcast the games. If they don't
Hmm.
have the games, we have nothing to broadcast. Well, the games are being put on because they're spending billions of dollars. We come in with our crews and take over and go, hey, here's something going on, and then that's it. So yeah,
And
it's
even more unfair, and something that coming from a guy that loves track and field, when you're an Olympian, if you're sponsored, track Brooks is a major sponsor of track and field athletes. If
right,
you're an Olympian, you can't wear your Brooks. You have to wear Nike because that's the
right,
official, apparel of the Olympic team. So you're getting paid a ton of money. And I could think of one of my favorite runners, Nick Simmons, 800-meter runner, is majorly against what goes on where you can't even put a henna tattoo on your shoulder to temporarily promote you, the people that are
right.
paying you good money, giving them free shoes, free stuff, paying their entry into meets to kind of get back to them on the biggest stage. They're not allowed to do that, which again, it's under the dumb guise of amateurism kind of still peeking its ugly
It's
head
still
around
there.
there.
Yeah.
And it's something that needs to be fixed, which I don't, it's a big enough deal for a lot of young athletes to get to the Olympics and they'll kind of just go, yeah, I'll do whatever you say. Just let me compete. So it's a difficult situation with that too.
Well, brings to mind the Michael Jordan draping the flag over his shoulder because he was Nike and the rest of the team, they weren't sponsored by that.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed silly at the time because we weren't really that deep into it just yet. And when I saw that, I'm like, well, That's a stupid explanation for that. But he went, well, I'm not sponsoring. They're not sponsoring me, so I'm not going to endorse them.
Yeah.
But you're on the Olympic team. You should be proud to represent. Now I get it. Now I get it. I didn't get
As
it
long
then.
as you're not covering up the flag, you can cover up
Right.
whatever other logo you want at the time. You know what I
Right.
mean? It's like,
Yeah.
but I get it. You know, money, and again, money talks in the end over everything else, and that's the unfortunate evil of all of it.
Well, okay. Now you said you were here's again as the king of the segue. Here's the next segue. You mentioned that you were a college athlete at Marist.
Yep.
Okay. You weren't at Houston. You weren't at UCLA. You were at Marist. How does all of this affect someone at a not high profile school, but still on scholarship in college? All of this has just been wacky. Are you, if you were still in school, would you be preparing for a season? How does this affect you mentally, physically, all of that?
Mentally, it's destructive, period. Especially for someone that runs track, because I'd say 80% of track and field is mental. A lot of the people that compete at this level in track and field have the physical ability. It's kind of psyching yourself out and getting yourself ready. The beauty of being a runner in track and field, especially I was middle distance, long sprints, and especially you're training 24/7 anyway, all year round. Especially the distance guys, cross country, indoor, outdoor track, they never really get a break. So you're
Right.
always training. The difference is you're not competing. So it's tough when you're not competing. So it does hurt you. One of the major things, and I'm going to kind of broaden this out, not only with me at Marist, but you mentioned USC, UCLA, Texas. There was a big debate on why are we risking lives and risking this to just play some college football or just play some college basketball. Well, if you had to go on the biggest interview of your life, and in that interview, you might be promised millions of dollars to set up your family and generations for your kids for the rest of their lives, you wouldn't risk coronavirus to wear a mask, sit 6 feet away from that interviewer to go do that interview, because that's essentially what you're asking these kids to do. Because a lot of these kids, whether we don't look at it this way, but college sports are a giant interview
Yeah.
for the pro teams, and not all of them are going to get the opportunity. But your kids like a Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields, you see now why both of them were so big on wanting to play this year, because they're geared up to go 1-2 in the draft and now get their family set up on their first contract. They're going to see more money than most of us can imagine.
Right.
And when you trickle it back down to the smaller schools like Marist, it does have an effect, because there are great sprinters, great distance runners everywhere. If we don't get to compete at a high level, if we don't get to compete in big, high profile meets, there's a chance that we don't get the shot to go and run for some of the running clubs that compete at a high level that maybe can get us to get to the next level, that can get us into worlds, that can get us to go and compete in the Olympics. Because unlike football and some of your major organized sports, individual sports, when it gets to the highest level, when you're getting to the championships, your D3 champion more than likely could have competed very highly in that Division I championship.
Right. Right.
And that's in wrestling, that's in track, that's in any individual sport, swimming. So I bring up Nick Simmons again. He was a D3 national champion for 3 years up at a small school in Oregon, and ends up being our lead 800-meter runner and Olympian represented, and one of the better Olympians we had in a long time there. So it does have a major effect. How would you gear up for this? I talk to my college coach all the time. We're still really good friends. Pete Colazo, I've had him on my show. He's just a great leader of young individuals. And he said it's just completely screwed up right now. There's no precedent for this. There's nothing set for this. Your seniors are distressed, even though they get an extra season. This is, and here's the major effect on the small schools. Your seniors that get an extra season aren't going to use it, because a
Right.
lot of the seniors there are just running for the love of running to try and get the best times that they can. It's not like your USCs, your Texas, your SEC schools, your Florida States, where that extra season means everything, because they're competing to go get on the Hoka 1-1 team and go and compete to go be an Olympian. They're guaranteed basically those spots. So they want that extra season. Over at a small school like Marist, you're not doing that. You're there to get your degree. If you hang on to get your master's, okay, you'll use that extra season. If not, you're gonna go home and go start your career in whatever it is you majored in. So that's where the small school gets the effect. Is that extra season? The seniors completely affected terribly, and the freshmen don't get to experience it. And who knows if they're going to hang around the sport or not?
Well, and there are two things that you mentioned in there that are interesting to think about. One, from the last part, if you keep, say you had six seniors prepared to graduate and they don't graduate, well, you just sliced away your recruiting class.
Yeah.
It's not like you said, and now we're going to expand and we're going to give 8 extra scholarships. You don't
NCAA is
have the
not making that
possibility to do that. So,
exception. No,
right.
no.
So I just, not only did I not get to finish competing my high school senior year, but even if I was prepared to go someplace else, like, well, there's no room for you now. Sorry.
Yep.
Where are you going to
Yep.
go? What are you going to do?
And scouting has been completely screwed up. The dead period has been extended now. And it's, again, for individual sports, for football, you have Huddle. So you can at least watch game film on Huddle. It's been a great revolutionary website. And it goes up to the collegiate level where it's awesome, where if you're a kid in high school, you can go watch Trevor Lawrence's highlight tape because he has it on Huddle. Like, it's a really cool system there. Right. Basketball, I think, has their own version of it. Your team sports have that. And college coaches use it constantly. In track, you're lucky if a parent films a race. No
Right.
one's filming these races in high school unless it's the state championship meet. So coaches rely on being able to get to these meets and go watch them to scout kids. Now these kids aren't competing. Now there's no scouting. So now you're going off of sophomore, junior times, and a lot of kids, especially at the high school level, are late bloomers, where if you have a kid that was barely breaking a 5-minute mile as a junior, could end up being a 4:30 miler by his senior year. But coaches aren't going to know that. So these kids may never actually compete now. And you're missing out on a quality runner. And it's just a cluster. You put the last word together, because that's what it is right now for the recruiting and scouting and all that as well.
Right. And another part that you mentioned was when you're looking at the job interview portion of it. If you're Trevor Lawrence, let's use that as an example. Yeah. We've seen you. We know what you're doing. But how many of these people that are the third string quarterback or the eighth man on the basketball team or whomever, they go into athletics as a career, not necessarily as a player, but as in coaching, scouting, administration, and all of that interaction that they have with other people. It could be that chance meeting you have with someone that gets you that job when you graduate, that gets you the video coordinator job someplace else, or what, and you've eliminated that. You're hiding behind a mask. There's no personality there. No one sees you. You don't get to shake hands with the other coach. You don't get to see the other athletic director doesn't get to see you. All those things, that the interactions and those chance meetings that we run across all the time, and you never know. This is the thing, the beauty of this. You never know who's going to be your benefactor. You just don't know. That's why you're always on high alert. Hey, I'm going to be the guy, because you never know who it's going to be. Well, you don't know who's going to find you there, but those people aren't there to find you now. So that job that you may have got and may have made you GM of the Philadelphia 76ers at some point. Nope, not going to happen now. So it's the whole thing is, and it's an even playing field for everybody. I get that, but it's how do we get out of it? That's been my main concern of how do we get out of it? I know how we got into it, but how do we get out of it? And do we just say, hey, 2 years of people, sorry, you're done. If you're a junior in high school or a senior in high school, can't help you. I don't know what to do for you.
And honestly, that's what it's going to be. And Frank, I did mean to ask you if you needed me to wear a mask, because I've seen that a few times where people on Zoom calls are wearing a mask. Yeah. But I digress. In terms of people that benefited, though, you talked about the other side, but how about Zach Wilson from BYU? He had a good year last year. Because he played this year, granted, BYU schedule was cakework because all their people, they had a great schedule lined up and they all dropped out on him.
Right.
But even with that weak schedule, Zach Wilson is probably not going to be selected second by the Jets, but his name is there. Who benefited more than him? And if this season didn't happen, we're looking at Zach Wilson maybe not getting drafted, or maybe a 5th, 6th round kid because of what he did last year. So, and like you said, again, the chance meetings, and, you're just hoping at this point, if you're in high school, that you were good enough your junior year, or you have a good enough connection with some coaches that you made as a recruiting trail. And again, like you said, you can't talk to kids until basically their end of junior year too. So it's this situation is how do we get out of it? I really think it's going to be sorry. That's what it's going
Yeah,
to be.
that's it, right?
Sorry.
Yeah,
And we're gonna have so many great talents that there's always great talents that go undiscovered. You can go walk into a basketball court in Baltimore, or go up to Rucker Park, and you'll see NBA caliber kids that just never got a
still
chance.
got there.
Or you go
There could
into
be
any
more of them,
boxing room and you see guys that can move like the best of them, but maybe they don't want it or they just don't get the chance to do it.
right?
So it happens all the time, but this time it's kind of just these kids want it and they're screwed. They don't have a
Yeah.
shot.
Well, you mentioned something. If you're looking off a film of your junior year, let's say my junior year, if it was the fall of my junior, I was barely 15 years old.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
wasn't even close to being ready to do anything. So, I'm a late bloomer and I was young. So,
yeah.
well, we don't even see him on the radar. But there's better to come. Well, not for you, there's not. So, yeah, there's a whole thing of how do we make this work or can we make this work? And that's the thing. And I didn't want to, I know we talked about earlier about other things we want to talk about, but I think we've
Yeah,
touched on
listen, there's
something
a
here
good
that's,
conversation.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We've touched on something that it's well, let's use J.R.R. Tolkien. Let's use that as an example. Okay, yeah, right back there. Let's say that all we got was the Cimmerillion. We didn't get the rest of it, which I had to chew through that. That was tough.
No one will read it. It's the Bible of Middle Earth. It's like, all right,
Yeah,
people love the good book. People love the Bible, but tell me you could sit down and, if you're not a very religious person, reading the Bible from front to back is difficult. It
right.
is a difficult thing to
It is
do.
tough, right?
And if anyone's never read the Cimmerillion, I recommend listening to it on audiobook. It's
Yeah,
better
right.
that way.
It, it,
But
it started 3 times after you fall asleep, right?
but it is a Bible-esque type of book, and Tolkien's imagination was insane. He set out with the Lord of the Rings to write an allegory about World War II and created a world that we all love. So, well, a lot of us love. I can't say all. I'm speaking for all nerds, but it's again, like you said, and yeah, what if he never? What if this happened? How many great authors right now are not getting a chance with
Right,
publishers because they can't make a face-to-face pitch about a book?
right. Yeah.
It's
And
it's insane.
that's my correlation exactly. That it just that year didn't happen, and if that year didn't happen, how many subsequent years will happen? That's the scary part to me.
We're going to miss out on those types of books, Frank, but we're going to get a ton of books about how I survived 2020
Sure.
and how I survived 2021. And
Right.
we're going to miss out on a lot of different books and we're going to get a lot of the same books. And it's going to be, ones I'm probably not going to read, but that we're missing out on definitely some great authors, great young authors that, again, it's a correlation. This is all a correlation with, everything that's going on because everyone's going to be missing out on a lot. I feel like our little industry of podcasting has been the one to boom because now everyone's bored. So everyone's like, oh, I'm going to pick up and do a podcast. And
Right.
it's great because podcasting's getting in and, there's more of it, but it also sucks because,
Now everybody's
competition's
in.
great, but now
Yeah.
everyone's doing it and it's a flood of everything. And some big names are now just jumping in and doing it. And it's like, man, don't do that. Like,
Yeah.
we're trying to get noticed. What are you
Yeah.
doing, man?
I'm trying to carve out my niche, and now
exactly.
it's like, well, but the funny thing about it is, and this is exactly, I've been working on this and other stuff. Well, we'll talk about off the air about how to make this more business ready.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the problem has been getting people to understand what we're doing right now. You go, well, it's just an audio thing. No, we can do it as a visual thing. Well, who's going to watch two guys talking about stuff? Well, and how are you going to do it? What's the, what is the hardware? What is the science behind it? And you try and explain to them, like, it's not that hard. It's really simple. They go, well, no, I don't understand. And now everyone can do it. I said, see, I told you. It's just me, a camera, and a microphone. That's it. It's not that hard. But now people go, oh, I see it. So it could work out for people in the end. But again, like you said, now the big guys are saying, I can do this too. I don't have to go to the studio. No, go to the studio. Leave us alone. Make it easy.
And TikTok has, I think, given
Right.
everyone a ton of confidence and things like Instagram and Vine before this. And it's just, everyone now can get in front and do a little bit of something. But I think what really is going to distinguish all of us is, not to be mean, you could see the ones that have talent. You could see the ones that are naturally good at these types of things.
Right.
versus the ones that are just doing it. And I'm not knocking the ones that are just doing it because there's always room to grow. I could tell you, go back and listen to my first 5 podcasts, the
Oh,
Sports Opinions
geez.
podcast. You won't listen to me ever again. So please don't.
Right.
Don't go do it. But it takes time to grow, and I encourage everyone to do it. And if anyone that's listening to this that wants to start a show, I'm always willing to talk about what I do, what I have, how I do it, because I feel like podcasting, as much as it's a competition, it's also a community with us where I do want to see a bunch of us get successful because these connections are great. And, again, Frank, I'm going to have you on my show at some point in the near future just because it's always great to talk to other people like-minded. And as sports fans, we sit around and talk about sports all day anyway. So why not
Right.
do it here? So,
Right. And the thing, I'm sure you find this out as well. There's a big difference between being the guest and being the host.
it's so weird.
It is strange, isn't it? I'm the guest on a show on Thursday nights, and I'm talking and talking. I'm listening to myself talking. Like, isn't it time for you to shut up? What? Why are you still talking? Oh, that's my job now. But in this framework, I'm like, ask a question, listen for the answer, which leads you to another question. Which I don't think some people understand that is what you're there for. You're not there to talk. You're there to listen.
And that's definitely a different, and I'm actually making an effort to continue and giving you full answers because I am used to being on the other side of it. But it's like I had on Bob Rathbun, who you can listen to on Atlanta Hawks every single game. He sits next to Dominique and they call the games. And there's just some people that just make your job as the host easy because they're just so good at what they do. And Bob is one of the best in the business. And I honestly, I could have sat there and just been a fly on the wall in the podcast. He just made it so easy to do. And you find people like that get it and understand exactly what you just said about podcasting, where it's time to be the guest and it's time to be the host. And it's a weird dichotomy. And like you said, people don't get that. People sit there and look at it and go, man, you're asking questions and you're talking. It's like, there's a difference between no dead air. There's a difference between having a question ready. There's a difference between having an engaging question and not just a yes or no answer. And there's also a difference in being a good guest and not giving a yes or no answer. There's just so much more that goes into this that you don't know when you started either. You have no idea about this type of stuff.
Oh no. Well, I had the opportunity to talk to Pat Williams, GM for the Orlando Magic, or former GM for
Yeah,
Orlando
fantastic.
Magic.
Yeah.
And he said, well, send me a list of questions so I know what to talk about. I said, I can't do that. He said, why? It's like, I don't know what I want to ask you right now. I mean, I can ask you the broad things, but you're just going to give me the answers that are already prepared, that you already know, that you've already talked about on another show and on another show and another show. I don't want to do that. And I'd rather not have you on just to have you repeat stuff that you've already said before. Because you're not going to be excited to do it. You're doing me a favor, which I appreciate, but it's not going to be even though you're Pat Williams, you're a great guy, as far as I know, I don't think the show will be all that exciting. I can give you, here's the thing that I tell people. I have about 3 or 4 questions in my mind that I rarely ever ask. I know the direction where I want it to go, but it never goes there. If someone's trying to promote a book or something, cool. I had Fred Clare on, the former GM for the Dodgers, who's working with City of Hope in LA, or however you want to put it. And there is the genesis of the show right there.
Yeah. Because that's the thing. If you can go off on tangents and talk about some other interesting things, because another thing that I found out that I tell everyone, they're like, yeah, I love what you do. I want to get into podcasting, but I don't know if anyone cares. If you find something interesting, this world has billions of people. I guarantee there's a few thousand that find what you find interesting as well. And you might be answering something for someone that never even thought that it was a topic that people cared about. So, again, it's something that it's so much fun to do too, because when you sit there and a bulb lights up in your guest's head and it's like, man, no one's ever asked me that. And then they start rambling. It's like, oh, now I did my job. Now I could sit back and go, all right, we're cool here. Like
that is almost the best feeling you're going to get from this. As we mentioned, if someone says, that's a great question, you're like, well, yeah, I thought so. I came up with it. But, it's like, well, I never thought of that before. Like, really? Okay. And when they tell you something, when they say, I've never said this before, but, and then they go, like, you've never mentioned this before to anybody but me?
And speaking of
Wow.
that, so interesting story. So something that was kind of like that moment. I mentioned I had Dominique Dawes on, who was a part of the Fab Five for the Olympic gymnasts, which was a great story. First Olympic gold medal for our women of all time, and it was a fantastic story. She really wanted to talk about one of the big things. She started her own gym, which you would think, okay, she was a gymnast. Of course, she's going to start her own gym.
Makes sense,
She's
right?
held off on starting this gym for a really long time for the main reason she did not want her daughters to get involved in gymnastics.
Wow.
They had to beg her to get in because she talked about just the culture of abuse that
Right.
is in gymnastics. And she was saying, that's a reason, but I've never, opening up about it is something that is tough to do. And she said the issue is that the world of gymnastics, you're constantly just told you're inadequate, you're not
Right.
perfect, and you are not good enough. You are always inadequate. And after years of doing that, from the age of 4
Right.
to wherever they end their career, these women and men walk away, and especially the women walk away with problems, with mental issues. She said there's still teammates of hers that can't go to a gym. They cannot watch the Olympics. They can't go to a gym. They
Right.
won't do it because it just brings back terrible memories of basically being in a military type of setting all the time. And we talked about, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Stick It, which is like the big joking gymnastics movie. And she said the sad thing is there's realities in that
Right.
where the girls are all trained. They don't really know what the outside world is because they only live in this gymnastics bubble. The parents are that way. The girls really are that sheltered and they are that broken. They made it into a comedy, but she said a lot of these girls that come out as women are broken when they come out. And I heard that and I was like, you hear about these types of things. And
But you've never heard it from someone who's been through it, right?
it's such a high profile person and
Right.
someone that experienced so much success where she was like they had a reunion of the 96 Olympic team and she didn't know if she wanted to go. She went, but it was just so weird to be back there.
Right.
And and I commended her. I love the fact that she started the gym and she said her gym is completely different. It is a place where, and the instructors know that it's not there to be a militaristic style. You need to do this. It's a place for where kids want to have fun and learn gymnastics. And we all think about certain things, especially in team sports. You're told you're here to have fun. Winning's fun. Let's get together. Let's have fun. But again, I go back to the individual sport. Since it's all on you,
Right.
it is such a different game when it's all on you. And it was just tough to hear from Dominique just how distressing her career, which was so great and should have been so joyous, is not one of her, it's one of her prideful moments, but it's not one of her best moments of her life.
Right.
And it's so
Right.
sad to see people that we idolize and that I love watching Dominique Dawes and that team compete. And now to hear that doesn't put a damper on what they did, but man, it gives me a different perspective on what they did.
That look behind the
So yeah.
curtain is kind of it's a little disturbing on occasion. Yeah. Well,
Oh
but
yeah.
we get it from everything, and this is another thing we could go on for about another 3 hours. When you're looking at youth sports and AAU and all that stuff and 7-on-7 and everything, I'll give you a brief one, so I won't go to the whole thing. When I was coaching basketball, we had our little summer camp. It was a small school, and we had like 30 kids at the camp or something like that, from grades 4 to 8 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't like we expected greatness out of them. We just wanted them to play and have fun. That was our thing. Even though we
Yep.
know they're going to play on the varsity team at some point, we're just getting them some fundamental skills and to enjoy playing the game. So as they get older, they still enjoy playing the game. That was the plan. And as we're going through the camp, you give out awards here, awards there for, most improved, most hustle, that kind of stuff. Lady called us after the camp was over, like literally 45 minutes after the camp was over, picked up her kids, and everyone went home. And she called and she was irate. Well, my grandson is crying because of your camp. Okay. A little more information.
Why? Yeah,
I don't
why?
know what's going on. Who is your grandson? What did we do? We made sure we didn't have anybody in the broom closet out in the back. I mean, we're good, right?
Yeah.
And she said, well, his brother and his cousins all got trophies and he didn't get one.
Okay.
Okay.
And
And yeah, and so I said, so again, who is your grandson? She told me his name. Like, oh, he's the kid that stood in the corner with his finger up his nose the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that sounds like him. Uh-huh.
Then why does he get a trophy?
Why does he? Well, everyone else got a
Yeah.
trophy. He didn't do anything. That doesn't mean he's not going to be a great player 6 years down the road. Doesn't mean he's not going to grow to be 6'10" and dunk on everybody. We're looking at what happened right now. He didn't work to get a trophy. But then you look at how things progress down the road, and now you've got kids playing on AAU teams that are more important than their high school team, which it could be, it may not be, but that's the way to look at it.
Yep.
And that it's individual decision. However you want to look at it is fine. But you're going to get seen if you're playing on an elite AAU team and you jump from team to team to make sure you get seen, and you're playing in these tournaments, you're traveling there and all that. And this is my problem with especially college basketball, is that we're turning out kids that don't know how to play, but they know how to look good. But they have no idea how to play the game because they haven't been asked how to play the game. They haven't been taught those things on a daily basis. It's like, oh, you can run and jump and shoot threes. You should be on that team. And that team gets seen and they get recruited. And so now we have college players who can't play, and we have NBA players who can't play. And we can make this correlation to a lot of sports, but it's kind of the same thing. Travel baseball.
That's the growth of the 3-and-D player, I think, to me, because as much as these, if you get to the NBA and you're a 3-and-D player, there's more than likely you could play the rest of the game because you got there. And if you stick around, you just have a niche. But a lot of these kids are now going in high school and college to try and be a 3-and-D player. And that's not what you should be, because, and the fact that the mid-range jumper is now dead is a correlation of the fact that, like you said, we're taking what kids can do and we're not trying to make kids all around players anymore. We're just trying to find what the kid does best and just make them do it. And a good correlation with that, in my example, is I'm not going to say any names, but I coached some high school football, and a lot of your high school football athletes, especially your skill players, do go and play some basketball. And we had this one kid, amazing athlete. He didn't play football until his senior year. He was our best wide receiver on the team, and it wasn't even close. Probably his best sport but he loved basketball. And he would play, and I'd always go watch the games. I didn't coach basketball. My uncle did. I knew the head coach very well. And I'd watch him play, and there would be times where he didn't really play defense, and he would just go play lazy defense and try and poke the ball from the back. It never worked. So I pulled him aside one time, and I was like, so has anybody ever stolen the ball from you from doing that move? No, coach, of course not. Then what makes you think it's going to work on another kid that's pretty damn near your talent level? I never thought of that. Play some defense. But it's like those things. But the thing is, I'd say it to him, but a lot of coaches won't, because he was the best player on the team.
Right.
And not to knock my coach, and my uncle sure as hell will say it to him because he says whatever he wants to anybody. But it's a lot of what you said. When you find a kid that has talent, I find this is my issue in football, because what we're doing in football is we see there's a pandemic on tackling. Tackling is bad. And I feel like that leads to a lot of our head issues. That's the main problem with our head issues, is we don't use form anymore. And one of the problems is when you get this uber talented, uber athletic kid at the high school level, the lower levels, the Pop One or whatever level that they play is, you're not willing to tweak that kid because that kid is making you win games. So you don't want to really tweak what he does. You're not telling him that as a safety, burying his head into a kid, it makes a great highlight. But you're not telling him that just because you can't see him, you're going to get yourself hurt, and you're also going to cost us a game because you're going to whiff. But you're willing to live with that whiff because his talent is so much above everybody else's that he's going to win you the game there. And then we get to the pros, and we have these corners and these safeties that can't tackle anybody, and they're getting hurt. And now we're doing head injuries. And for me, I look at it, and my brother's 8 years younger than me, so I helped coach him up in Pop Warner because I always played football myself. And I was a big stickler on form, and all of my coaches growing up, and this is where I can't believe what some people say, because these football players walk around now like we didn't know what head injuries were 10, 15, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. I remember being taught, you put your head down and you tackle someone, you're going to break your spine and you're never going to walk again.
Yeah.
And this was 25 years ago now. You're never going to walk again. You're going to get a concussion and you're going to break your neck. And that stuck with me as a 6-year-old that my pads were out to here.
Right.
That stuck with me.
Right.
And to believe that People around my age, in their 30s and younger, we're never being taught that putting your head down and tackling with your crown is going to get you severely injured or dead. Is I can't believe that. I can't believe that these kids weren't being taught that. But if they were, there's more of a problem on the coaching level than there
Exactly.
is on the safety level. Because I will tell everyone that's listening and everyone that says it, football is a safe sport. There are injuries that occur, but that is a product of the violent sport itself. But in
Right.
terms of safety, when taught and done properly, it is one of the safest sports on the planet. I will tell you that much right away. My burst injuries have come from track and soccer, not football.
Football. Right.
I've had little nicks. I've had little things here. My head might be a little bit off, but that also might just be me in general. But it is one of the safest sports out there. It becomes unsafe when you're not doing the form. And everyone now wants to talk about getting better technology in the helmets, more cushioning, better this. You give a premier elite athlete more leeway to be unsafe just to make a better, bigger play, they're going to
Right.
do it. They're not
Right.
going to get their form better. They're not. These guys aren't out there caring about head injuries right now. They're caring about winning games, making more money, getting a chip. And then 5 years down the road, when they can't think, their families and them are concerned. In the moment, they don't care.
Well,
And
how many concussions did you hear of? Well, maybe it's also technology when they're wearing leather helmets. You didn't tackle with your head when you're wearing leather helmets. You just didn't
sure
do it.
didn't.
Why?
Nope.
Why would you do that? Yeah. Well,
The,
it carries over the same thing like in baseball. You've got a guy on first, your left-handed batter, and they send six guys to the right side of the field, and you're watching it going, why don't you just bunt it down the third baseline where there's nobody there? You've
they're
moved your
not taught
guy
to
to
do that.
third. Yeah, well, we can't do that. Why? Well, analytics say hit it to 17 different guys. Just hit it over there. And
And
even if you don't have to bunt, why can't you do the opposite field? I don't get it.
I guarantee there's an unwritten rule somewhere in a stupid sport of baseball with their unwritten rules, which I can't stand. It's the dumbest thing on the planet to me.
Right.
The unwritten rules. So I can't bat flip in my home run, but your pitcher can walk off the mound with a big fist pump and scream after striking me out. So
Sure.
you're
Right.
telling me the next at bat I could throw my bat at him. That's all you're saying. Like what is like? Why is there such a big deal? Baseball players are soft. I'm sorry. I love the
Sure.
sport of baseball, but they are
You're
soft
right.
individuals mentally. So I don't want to hear. And that baseball, I love the sport. The unwritten rules drive me nuts because you're telling a guy that could throw the ball 99 miles an hour that that's not a weapon that they can use it now.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Yeah.
But we kind of got off on a tangent there, but it was a
Well,
good
that's
one.
okay. That's okay. Well, I tell you what, we probably said an hour, which is what we usually do, and actually, I think we said half an hour, and I almost always go past that. Here, do me a favor, as we wrap this up, because
Sure.
I could do this for another 3 hours. This is great. But where can we find you? How do we get in touch with you? All that stuff. Put all that information out there so we can add some graphics to it.
Again, Alex Cuesta. My main podcast, the Sports Opinions podcast. I also do two more. I do one with my brother called Cuesta Dose. It's kind of a variety podcast, and I do a political one called The Median, where I bring people on and I promote civil political discourse again. So if you're a politics person and you hate current politics, you'll like The Median. Um, I'm also the founder of the Opinions Podcast Network, which has 7 podcasts underneath it, including the 3 I just mentioned. Anywhere from sports to comics, you could find them all. There's a Twitter for the Opinions Podcast Network. It's at the real OPN. Sports Opinions has a Twitter at Sports Opinion 30 and an Instagram at the same area. I'm not going to mention the other two because they are what they are. You'll go find them. If you go Opinions Podcast Network, you can find the others. They're all there. You can find me at _Cuesta30 on both Instagram and Twitter. Twitter is probably more your sports stuff. Instagram, you're going to see pictures of me and my daughters. Mostly my daughters because nobody wants to look at me. So it might not be the most interesting place if you're a sports fan. But yeah, that's where you can find me. We try to put out a show for Sports Opinions bi-weekly. And it's always a good time. I'm going to, you'll see Frank on there soon. He's coming on. He doesn't have a choice now.
Now, I'm going to ask you what that would have been the tagline to end it, but I'm going to ask you one thing. My brother is 9 years older than me. So, how is it to do a show with your brother?
I raised him to be as much of a nerd as me. And unfortunately, I imparted the teams that I like on him. So he happens to be a Jets fan like me.
Okay.
He was a suffering Nets fan for the longest time, even though right now we're not mad, but he was a suffering Nets fan. He likes the Yankees. He's a big UFC guy. He's my best friend. So it's been super easy. We talk every day, every single day. I'm really close with his friends group. They're a bunch of my little brothers. A lot of the guys on my network doing shows are from his friends group.
Okay.
So it's a real easy transition. A lot of the same likes. He's my best friend. So it's a simple transition to talk to him and do different things with him. It's just been a blast. He even agreed to do it with me.
Cool. Well, see, my brother is my best friend. There's no way in hell I could do a show with him. So we talk every day, and it usually boils down to the same three things. And I'm like, I'm going to talk to him for another 3 hours about this. Okay, but it's what we do. So yeah, I understand. So, well, I appreciate you being here. Thank you very much.
Thank
yeah,
you
I
so
can't
much.
wait to do your show.
Yeah.
As you can tell, I like to talk, but I don't always do that. So, yeah, I'll make sure we get this cut up right. We'll make it look good, and enjoy the day, and we will roll from there.
Thanks, Frank.
All righty.